I'm Ava, 18, and this is the story of how I took back my life, one devastating truth at a time. Growing up, my parents, Aunt Carol and Uncle David, always said I was a quiet child, observant. They meant ignored. From the moment my cousin Madison arrived on the scene, just 6 months after me, she became the undisputed sun around which my family's universe revolved. Madison, with her perfectly curled blonde hair, her dazzling, practiced smile, and her uncanny ability to utter precisely the right charming phrase at precisely the right moment, was their golden child. She was everything I wasn't, or rather, everything they wished I was. They praised her tirelessly, showered her with gifts, and meticulously planned her future, while I, their actual daughter, faded into the background, a ghost in my own home. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. My earliest memories are tinged with this stark comparison. I remember being 4 years old, painstakingly drawing a vibrant, lopsided flower with purple petals and a green stem, presenting it to my mother with trembling hands and a hopeful heart. She smiled, a distant, fleeting curve of her lips, and said, "That's nice, dear." 5 minutes later, Madison, holding up a finger-painted masterpiece that vaguely resembled a rainbow, was met with rapturous applause, cries of "our little artist," and a prime spot on the refrigerator door. My flower, still clutched in my hand, ended up tucked away in a forgotten drawer, a silent testament to my burgeoning understanding of my place. As we grew, the gap between us widened into a chasm. Madison excelled, or at least, her achievements were always amplified, polished, and presented as exemplary. If she got a B, it was a strong B, almost an A. She just needs to focus more on her extracurriculars. If I got an A, it was good, but is that really challenging you enough, Ava? Every accomplishment of hers was celebrated with fanfare, every slight misstep excused with grace. Meanwhile, my own genuine efforts, my quiet successes, were either unnoticed or met with a lukewarm acknowledgement that felt colder than outright criticism. My parents, who had always seemed to me like perfectly ordinary people, transformed into doting, almost obsessed, guardians when Madison was around. It was as if their capacity for love, for pride, for everything good, was entirely consumed by her radiant presence, leaving nothing for me. The differences weren't just emotional, they were deeply, jarringly practical. When Madison decided she wanted to learn piano, a brand new, gleaming upright piano appeared in the living room within a week, along with a tutor who charged $100 an hour. When I expressed an interest in coding, I was told there were plenty of free online tutorials, and perhaps I could use the family's old, sluggish desktop in the corner of the den. When Madison needed help with her English essay, my parents spent hours brainstorming with her, researching historical contexts, refining her arguments. When I asked for help with my advanced calculus, I was told to just reread the textbook, "You're a bright girl, you'll figure it out." The message was clear. Madison's potential was worth investing in, nurturing, pouring resources into. Mine, it seemed, was expected to fend for itself. High school brought a new arena for this dynamic to play out: college applications. This was the ultimate prize, the culmination of years of preparation, the golden ticket to a future beyond our small, unremarkable town. Madison, of course, had her sights set on the most prestigious Ivy League universities. Her bedroom walls were plastered with brochures from Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford. Her days were a dizzying ballet of AP classes, debate club, student council, charity work, and extracurriculars that seemed custom designed for a perfect college resume. And, naturally, she had the best tutors money could buy: a former admissions officer from an Ivy for essay review, a specialized math tutor, a history professor who prepped her for advanced placement exams. The bills for these services, I later found out, ran into the tens of thousands of dollars. My parents considered it an investment, a necessary expense for their brilliant niece's future. I, meanwhile, navigated my own academic path quietly. I gravitated towards subjects that truly fascinated me: astrophysics, creative writing, ancient history. I devoured books, spent hours in the library, and maintained a strong academic record. But my parents never inquired about my classes, never looked over my homework, never offered a tutor or a practice test. My college aspirations were a distant hum in my own mind, something I pursued in stolen moments, late at night, long after Madison's carefully orchestrated study sessions had concluded. I applied to state universities, reputable but not elite, places I knew I could get into on my own merit, places where I hoped to finally escape the shadow that had enveloped my entire life. The pressure on Madison, though self-imposed, was immense. Every conversation at dinner revolved around her applications, her essays, her interviews. My mother would beam, "Madison's so stressed, but she's working so hard for those dream schools." And my father would nod sagely, "She's destined for great things." I'd sit there, swirling my fork in my pasta, listening, feeling a strange mix of detachment and a dull, familiar ache. A part of me, the part that was still a child yearning for parental recognition, wished desperately that they would look at me with even a fraction of that pride, that intense focus. Then came the college essay. This was, Madison declared, the most crucial part of her application, the place where she could truly shine, where her unique voice could resonate with the admissions committees. She agonized over it for weeks, her tutor offering increasingly frustrated advice. My parents, too, weighed in, suggesting anecdotes, refining sentences, acting as a personal editorial board. I overheard snippets of their discussions from my room, the familiar words floating through the thin walls. They wanted something deeply personal, something that showcased her resilience and empathy. It was a Tuesday afternoon, a particularly dreary one, when the world tilted on its axis. I was scrolling through my old blog, a private space I had created years ago, a digital diary where I poured out my thoughts, my observations, my dreams, and my fears. I wrote about everything: the sting of being overlooked, the quiet joy of discovery, the complexities of human relationships, the vastness of the universe. It was raw, honest, and deeply personal. I rarely shared it with anyone, considering it too vulnerable, too much a part of my inner self. As I scrolled through an entry from 2 years prior, a particular piece about a volunteer experience at a local animal shelter, a profound sense of déjà vu washed over me. I had written about the quiet, unwavering resilience of a neglected stray dog, about the empathy required to connect with creatures who had known only cruelty, about finding a sense of purpose in small acts of kindness. It was a piece I was particularly proud of, a distillation of my own developing worldview. And then, a cold, sickening dread began to crawl up my spine. My mind flashed to a conversation I had overheard just days before, Madison excitedly telling my mother about a breakthrough in her essay, how she had finally found the perfect theme. The quiet resilience of creatures and the profound empathy it teaches us. The words, alarmingly similar, echoed in my memory. My hands trembled as I opened Madison's laptop, which she had carelessly left unlocked on the kitchen counter while she was outside talking on the phone. My heart was pounding, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. I knew it was wrong to snoop, a violation of privacy, but a powerful, unshakable intuition compelled me forward. I navigated to her college application portal, and there it was. Her main essay. My eyes scanned the screen, disbelief warring with a rising tide of fury. It wasn't just similar. It was, almost word for word, my blog post. The opening hook, the evocative descriptions of the animal shelter, the specific anecdote about the neglected dog, the philosophical conclusion about empathy and resilience. It was all there, thinly veiled with a few swapped synonyms, a rearranged sentence or two, but undeniably, indisputably mine. She had stolen my words, my thoughts, my asterisk voice asterisk. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. This wasn't just plagiarism, it was a profound violation. She hadn't just stolen an essay, she had stolen a piece of my soul, something deeply personal and vulnerable. And my parents, her unwitting accomplices, had celebrated it as a masterpiece of her own creation. The betrayal was like a physical blow. All the years of being ignored, of being second best, of watching her bask in unearned glory, culminated in this single, sickening moment. The anger, simmering beneath the surface for so long, finally boiled over, scorching away every last trace of my quiet, obedient nature. In that instant, a single, undeniable thought crystallized in my mind, cold and clear. I would not let this stand. Madison, the golden child, would finally face the consequences of her dishonesty. And this time, there would be no parental intervention, no excuses, no soft landings. This time, the truth would be sent to every single college she had applied to. And I would be the one to send it. The initial shock of discovering Madison's plagiarism slowly congealed into a cold, unwavering resolve. It wasn't a fit of rage, but a chilling clarity that settled deep within me. This wasn't just about an essay. It was about years of accumulated slights, of feeling like a ghost in my own life, of watching my parents lavish attention and resources on a child who, it now seemed, was built on a foundation of manufactured dachshund perfection. The theft of my words felt like the final, unbearable straw, a direct assault on the very essence of who I was. My quiet nature, long mistaken for passivity, now transformed into a steel resolve. I began to meticulously gather evidence, driven by a quiet, almost obsessive focus. My target, Madison's entire, carefully constructed facade of achievement. If her college essay was a lie, what else was? I knew Madison, and I knew how easily she could bend the truth, how readily my parents would accept whatever version of reality she presented. My observational nature, which they had dismissed as shyness, became my greatest asset. I had years of suppressed memories, small details I had noticed but dismissed, moments when Madison's narrative had felt just a little too perfect. Now, they resurfaced with chilling clarity. My first step was to print out a side-by-side comparison of her college essay and my original blog post. The similarities were undeniable, damning. I highlighted every identical phrase, every subtly tweaked sentence, every stolen idea. It was a visual representation of her deceit, irrefutable proof. I knew this was the core of my argument, the unassailable truth that would unravel everything. Next, I turned my attention to her high school career. Madison was notorious for her exaggerated extracurriculars. She was supposedly the president of the environmental club, a prodigious volunteer at the local soup kitchen, and a star member of the varsity debate team. I knew, from my own tangential involvement and quiet observations, that these claims were largely inflated, if not outright fabrications. The environmental club, for instance, had only 3 active members, none of whom were Madison. She had attended one meeting, complained about the lack of air conditioning, and then never returned. Yet, on her application, she boasted about spearheading a major recycling initiative that transformed the school's waste management. I found a school newspaper article from that year detailing the actual initiative, led by a dedicated senior named Sarah. Madison's name was nowhere to be found. I took a clear photograph of the article, carefully noting the date and publication. Her volunteer work at the soup kitchen was similarly embellished. I remembered Madison spending perhaps 3 hours there one Saturday for a mandatory school service project, mostly complaining about the smell and checking her phone. Yet her application spoke of hundreds of hours dedicated to serving the underserved, of profound connections forged with the vulnerable members of our community. I knew the coordinator of the soup kitchen, a kindly but no-nonsense woman named Ms. Henderson. I carefully drafted an email, posing as a student researching community service opportunities, subtly asking about their most dedicated volunteers from the past year. Her polite but firm reply, listing only a handful of consistent volunteers, conspicuously excluded Madison's name. I took a screenshot. The varsity debate team was perhaps the most audacious lie. Madison had tried out for the team in freshman year, struggled with public speaking, and quit after a week. Yet her transcript, thanks to some creative maneuvering by my parents who pulled strings with the notoriously lenient guidance counselor, listed her as a 4-year member, culminating in her being team captain in teen. Her senior year. I knew the actual debate captain, a fiercely intelligent girl named Chloe, who had indeed been captain for 2 years. I discreetly reached out to a friend of Chloe's, asking for old debate team rosters, ostensibly for a yearbook project. What I received was a complete list of members for all 4 years. Madison's name appeared only for freshman year, with a clear notation, withdrew after 1 week. I printed out the relevant sections. Then there were the awards. Madison's room was a shrine to fabricated accolades. The Regional Leadership Award, the Outstanding Community Service Medal, the Silverwood Youth Philanthropy Award. I remembered the local newspaper announcing the real recipients of these awards. None of them had been Madison. The Silverwood Youth Philanthropy Award, for example, had gone to a boy who had raised a significant amount of money for a local animal shelter. Ironically, the same one I had written about. I found the archived newspaper articles online, printed them, and circled the actual awardees. The social media lies were a goldmine of manufactured perfection. Madison maintained a pristine online persona, a carefully curated image of a virtuous, academically driven, and deeply empathetic young woman. Her Instagram was filled with photos of her studying tirelessly, volunteering at the hospital, and deep in philosophical debate. I knew, from years of quiet observation, that many of these were staged or outright false. The hospital volunteering photos, for instance, were taken during a school field trip to a medical center, where she spent most of the time taking selfies in the empty waiting room. I meticulously scrolled through her public posts, taking screenshots, cross-referencing them with actual events I remembered. Her carefully crafted captions, full of virtuous pronouncements, often contrasted sharply with the reality I had witnessed. Each piece of evidence was meticulously documented, filed, and cross-referenced. I was building a case, not just against Madison, but against the elaborate system of favoritism and illusion that had defined my family's life for so long. The process was chillingly methodical, almost clinical. There was no joy in it, only a cold, determined satisfaction. This wasn't revenge. It was an act of self-preservation, a desperate attempt to reclaim my own identity from beneath the suffocating weight of Madison's fabricated brilliance. Every photograph, every screenshot, every printed document was a brick in the wall of truth I was constructing. Finally, I compiled it all. A meticulously organized packet of undeniable evidence. The plagiarized essay, with my original blog post as damning comparison. The fabricated extracurriculars, supported by contradictory documentation. The false awards, disproven by public records. The misleading social media posts, exposed by their own staged artificiality. I wrote a cover letter, brief and to the point, outlining the systemic dishonesty and stating that the enclosed documentation would speak for itself. I refrained from any emotional appeals, any personal grievances. This was about truth, about integrity. I gathered the list of colleges Madison had applied to, which I had covertly copied from her application portal. There were 15 of them, the mix of Ivy League and other highly selective institutions. For each college, I prepared a separate, identical package. I purchased sturdy manila envelopes And, late one night, under the cloak of darkness, I drove to the nearest post office in a neighboring town, a place where I wouldn't be recognized. I wanted no trace, no connection back to me. I stood at the mailing counter, 15 envelopes stacked neatly in front of me, each one a silent missile aimed at Madison's carefully constructed future. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. The years of quiet hurt, of feeling invisible, culminated in this singular, deliberate act. I paid for the postage, envisioning each envelope winging its way to its destination, carrying the undeniable truth that would unravel the golden child's world. The weight of the moment was immense, yet I felt a profound sense of lightness, as if a lifetime of suppressed grievances was finally being set free. The truth, I knew, would find its way. And no one, absolutely no one, would ever know how. The days following the dispatch of those 15 envelopes were a strange ballet of anticipation and calculated normalcy. I moved through my routines, attended classes, and participated in family dinners, all while maintaining an outward facade of calm indifference. Inside, however, a tightly wound spring of expectation hummed, a low, persistent thrum of waiting. I watched Madison with a new, almost clinical eye, observing her unwitting dance towards an inevitable reckoning. She was still radiant, still the center of my parents' universe, blissfully unaware of the silent storm I had unleashed. Her confidence in her college applications remained unwavering, her talk filled with confident pronouncements about her top choice schools, her stellar recommendations. My parents, of course, reinforced this delusion. My mother would frequently announce, "Madison's sure to get into Yale, she's simply outstanding." My father would nod, "She's built a truly impressive profile. All that hard work will pay off." I'd nod along, offering non-committal hums of agreement, feeling a strange mixture of vindication and a quiet, almost melancholic pity. They were so invested in this carefully constructed narrative, so blind to the cracks forming beneath the gilded surface. It was a painful realization, understanding that their belief in Madison was so absolute that it had entirely eclipsed their perception of me, their own daughter. This wasn't about malice. It was about a deeply ingrained favoritism, a selective blindness that had become their default setting. The waiting period was a unique form of torment and liberation. Every time the mail arrived, a jolt would run through me. I'd casually check the mailbox, feigning disinterest, but my eyes would scan the envelopes, searching for any telltale university logos addressed to Madison. None came. Not yet. Admissions offices moved slowly, meticulously, especially for competitive applicants. I knew the process would take time, that the machinery of higher education ground at its own deliberate pace. The silence was unnerving, yet I understood it was merely the calm before the storm. A few weeks after I sent the packets, Madison received her first early decision notification. It was from a highly selected liberal arts college in a distant state, one she had considered a strong safety school. The envelope was thick, suggesting acceptance. My parents celebrated with genuine joy, uncorking sparkling cider, making toasts to Madison's bright future. Madison herself beamed, graciously accepting their accolades, though she privately confided to my mother that it wasn't her first choice, and she was definitely waiting for the Ivies. I watched her, a knot of dread and anticipation tightening in my stomach. Was my evidence not enough? Had my meticulously compiled truth been dismissed? The next day, Madison seemed strangely subdued. She spent hours in her room, emerging only for meals, her usual effervescence muted. My parents, wrapped up in their own excitement, barely noticed. I observed, quietly, patiently. The following morning, over breakfast, my mother asked, "So, Madison, darling, have you decided to accept that offer from Elmwood College? It's a wonderful institution." Madison picked at her toast, avoiding eye contact. Actually, Mom, I've decided to decline it. My mother's brow furrowed slightly. Decline? But why, dear? It's a perfectly reputable school. Madison sighed, a dramatic flutter of her eyelashes. It's just not the right fit. You know? I think I need a more rigorous academic environment, and I really want to be closer to a big city. It just feels small. She managed to sound both apologetic and superior. My parents, ever eager to justify her decisions, readily agreed, praising her ambition. Yes, of course, darling. You're meant for bigger things. We understand. I almost scoffed into my cereal. Not the right fit, was the convenient excuse for everything. Then came the second rejection. This one was from a prestigious state university, one that typically accepted students with Madison's GPA and test scores. This letter was thin, unambiguous. Madison received it herself, her face paling as she read it. She quickly crumpled it, shoving it deep into her backpack before anyone could see. But I saw the tremor in her hands, the sudden loss of her practiced composure. She retreated to her room, claiming a headache. My parents, busy discussing a new charity gala Madison was organizing another fabricated event, barely noticed her swift exit. The crack was widening. The rejections began to trickle in, one by one, each one a precise, calculated blow. Some were outright rejections, cold and impersonal. Others were deferrals, followed by subsequent rejections in the regular decision round. Each thin envelope, each tersely worded email, chipped away at Madison's golden facade. Her initial excuses became more elaborate, more desperate. They're clearly looking for something different this year, she'd insist. My extracurriculars were probably *2 diverse. They want specialists. Or, their alumni network is really cliquey, I heard. My parents, while still outwardly supportive, began to show subtle signs of unease. Their effusive praise grew quieter, their assurances less frequent. They still believed in her, but the reality was starting to chip away at their unwavering faith. The atmosphere in our house grew tense, thick with unspoken anxiety. Madison's sunny disposition evaporated, replaced by moodiness and sullen silences. She spent hours on the phone with her college counselor, her voice hushed and frantic. My parents, concerned but still in denial, attributed her distress to the immense pressure of college applications, never questioning the underlying reasons for the string of unexpected rejections. They reassured her, bought her expensive comfort food, and tried to distract her with shopping trips. I continued to observe, a silent sentinel. I felt no triumph, no surge of vindication. Only a quiet, grim satisfaction that the truth was, at last, having its undeniable impact. My own college application process, completed months prior, had been largely invisible to my parents. I had received acceptances from all the state universities I applied to, schools that genuinely interested me and matched my academic profile. I had chosen a strong program in astrophysics at a university several states away, a place where I could finally, truly, be myself, far from the suffocating influence of my family's distorted dynamics. I had received a small scholarship, enough to cover a significant portion of my tuition, a fact I hadn't bothered to mention to my parents, knowing it would be met with either indifference or a comparative critique. The final rejection came from Harvard, Madison's dream school, her ultimate ambition. It was a thick envelope, containing not only the rejection letter but also a standardized form detailing the reasons for denial. Madison ripped it open with trembling hands, her face a mask of desperate hope. As she read, her face drained of all color, becoming ashen. A small, strangled SOB escaped her lips. She crumpled the letter, letting it fall to the floor like a discarded dream. My mother, who had been hovering anxiously, rushed to her, embracing her sobbing niece. Oh, Madison, darling, it's all right. There are other schools. It's their loss, she murmured, trying to comfort her. But Madison pulled away, her voice raw with uncharacteristic fury. No! It's not all right. Something's wrong. This isn't right. I should have gotten in. My essay was brilliant. My grades were perfect. My extracurriculars were amazing. She looked around frantically, her eyes wild, searching for an explanation, a scapegoat. Her gaze landed on me, sitting quietly in the corner reading a book. A flicker of suspicion, fleeting and desperate, crossed her face. My parents, however, remained utterly oblivious to the true nature of Madison's distress. They launched into a flurry of phone calls, trying to leverage their connections, to appeal the decisions, to find out what went wrong. They were met with polite but firm stonewalling. Admissions offices, they were told, could not discuss specific reasons for rejection, nor could they be swayed by external pressure. The process was final. The integrity of their admissions process was paramount. As the weeks passed and the last of the regular decision letters arrived, Madison was left with no acceptances. Not a single one. The golden child, whose future had been so meticulously planned, whose path to success seemed so assured, was left with nothing. The silence in the house, once filled with her confident pronouncements, was now heavy with her resentment and my parents' bewildered disappointment. My mother would sigh dramatically. It's just unprecedented. I don't understand it. Madison was so deserving. No one ever asked how. No one ever connected the dots. No one ever suspected the quiet girl in the corner. I had meticulously covered my tracks, driven by a need for anonymity, a desire for the truth to stand on its own, uncolored by personal vendetta. The truth was the weapon, not me. As I packed my bags for my own university, a university that had accepted *me*, based on *my* merits, *my* essays, *my* authentic self, I felt a profound sense of liberation. The heavy cloak of invisibility I had worn my entire life began to lift. I was stepping out of the shadow, into my own light. The golden child's reign was over, brought down not by malice, but by the relentless, undeniable power of truth. And I, Ava, the quiet, ignored daughter, was finally free. The taste of this freedom was bittersweet, a mix of quiet satisfaction and the lingering ache of a childhood lost, but it was mine, and it was real. The summer that followed the college application fiasco was an unsettling, yet liberating, experience. The usual buzz of anticipation for Madison's departure was replaced by a heavy, palpable silence. Her presence in the house, once a source of constant activity and parental adoration, now felt like a lead weight, charged with sullen resentment. She barely spoke, spending most of her time holed up in her room, emerging only for meals, her face a mask of bitter disappointment and confusion. My parents, too, seemed to shrink under the unexpected blow. Their usual effervescent belief in Madison had taken a significant hit, replaced by a bewildered melancholy. They spoke in hushed tones about unforeseen circumstances and a truly baffling year for admissions. They never connected the dots, never questioned the fundamental reasons for her spectacular downfall. Their inability, or unwillingness, to see beyond their golden image of her was, in itself, a profound confirmation of their selective blindness. I, meanwhile, focused on my own preparations for college. My upcoming departure for a state university hundreds of miles away felt less like leaving home and more like escaping a gilded cage. I meticulously sorted through my belongings, packing books, clothes, and the few personal treasures I owned. Each item chosen felt like a deliberate step towards a future that was entirely my own, unburdened by the weight of comparison or expectation. I spent hours at the local library, immersing myself in astrophysics textbooks, feeling a thrill of genuine excitement that had been absent for too long. My parents, preoccupied with Madison's mysterious academic collapse, paid little attention to my impending journey. "Just let us know if you need anything, dear," my mother would say distractedly, her eyes fixed on Madison's closed bedroom door. "Make sure you have enough warm clothes." Their indifference, once a source of deep pain, now felt like a shield, protecting my secret and facilitating my escape. The day I left for college was anticlimactic. There were no emotional goodbyes, no tearful embraces. My father drove me to the bus station, a quiet, functional affair. He helped me load my 2 duffel bags onto the bus, offered a terse "be careful," and then was gone, undoubtedly eager to return to the somber atmosphere of our house, where Madison's presence, however muted, still held precedence. As the bus pulled away, I watched his car disappear in the rearview mirror, and a strange mix of relief and a lingering, almost imperceptible ache settled in my chest. It wasn't sadness, not exactly. It was the quiet understanding that a chapter of my life, a deeply painful one, was finally closing. The road ahead was unknown, but it was my road, and that was everything. Life at Northwood University was a revelation. For the first time, I was simply Ava. Not Ava, Madison's cousin. Not Ava, the quiet daughter. Just Ava. I threw myself into my studies, devoured lectures on cosmology and quantum mechanics, and found a deep satisfaction in challenging myself intellectually. My professors saw my potential, encouraged my curiosity, and treated me as an individual, not as an afterthought. I made friends, genuine connections forged over late-night study sessions and shared interests. They liked me for who I was, for my dry wit, and my surprisingly passionate arguments about the vastness of the universe. It was a liberation, a blossoming of the self I hadn't known existed. The quiet girl who had observed everything from the periphery finally had a center of her own. Meanwhile, back home, the consequences of Madison's deception continued to unfold. She eventually enrolled in a local community college, a far cry from the Ivy League dreams my parents had so meticulously cultivated. My mother, in her rare, brief phone calls, would sound strained, her voice losing its usual vibrancy. "Madison's adjusting," she'd say, though her tone suggested otherwise. "It's just not what we expected. She's struggling a bit with motivation." I knew, deep down, that Madison was likely floundering. Without the external validation, the constant praise, the carefully curated image, her inner landscape was probably barren. The illusion of her perfection had shattered, and she had no genuine foundation to build upon. My parents, however, remained stubbornly blind. They continued to blame the unfair admissions process, the changing landscape of higher education, anything but Madison's character or their own enabling behavior. Their unwavering belief in her inherent superiority remained, a stubborn, almost delusional loyalty. It was a strange form of love, perhaps, one that was entirely focused on a projected image rather than the complex, flawed reality of their child. They were more invested in the idea of Madison than in Madison herself. This realization was not triumphant, it was simply sad, a quiet understanding of the depth of their self-deception. Over the next few years, my life at Northwood flourished. I excelled in my astrophysics program, found a research opportunity working with a brilliant professor, and even had a few of my creative writing pieces published in the university's literary magazine. Each achievement felt deeply personal, genuinely earned, untainted by comparison. I was building a life that was authentic, driven by my own passions and talents. The distance, both physical and emotional, from my childhood home provided an invaluable space for me to grow, to define myself on my own terms. My contact with my parents became increasingly sporadic. Our conversations were polite, superficial, and always ended with me asking about Madison, and them offering vague, often negative updates. "She's thinking of taking a gap year," my mother would say, after Madison dropped out of community college. Or, "She's trying to find herself," when Madison bounced between various dig-and-day jobs. The golden child's trajectory had veered dramatically off course, but the fundamental question of why asterisks remained unasked, perhaps because the answer was too uncomfortable, too damaging to their carefully constructed reality. I never revealed my role in Madison's downfall. The silence was a deliberate choice. It wasn't about gloating or public humiliation. It was about justice, about truth finding its way without my overt intervention. The satisfaction I felt was quiet, internal. It was the satisfaction of knowing that honesty had, for once, prevailed over deception, that merit had, however indirectly, triumphed over unearned privilege. It was the satisfaction of reclaiming my own narrative, of finally stepping into the light that had been denied to me for so long. Years passed. I graduated with honors, accepted a prestigious fellowship for graduate studies in astrophysics, and embarked on a career that genuinely excited me. My life was filled with intellectual challenge, meaningful friendships, and a quiet contentment that came from living authentically. I built a small but comfortable life for myself, far from Silverwood, far from the shadows of my past. My parents eventually moved, selling the old house, the one where I had spent a lifetime feeling invisible. They had aged, their faces etched with a different kind of weariness now, a weariness that seemed to stem from persistent disappointment rather than the vibrancy of living. Madison, I heard through distant family members, had never truly found her footing. She drifted, never holding a job for long, never committing to anything, her early promise having completely evaporated. She was still, apparently, blaming external forces for her struggles, never acknowledging her own lack of genuine effort or the hollow foundation of her fabricated achievements. The last time I saw Madison was at a distant cousin's wedding. She looked older than her years, her once dazzling smile replaced by a hard, brittle expression. She made eye contact with me across the crowded room, a fleeting, almost imperceptible flicker of something in her eyes, something that looked suspiciously like a mixture of resentment and a strange, haunted curiosity. But she quickly averted her gaze, turning back to the conversation she was having, her laughter a little too loud, a little too forced. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The truth had already spoken, loud and clear, in the silence of her unfulfilled potential and the quiet triumph of my own hard-won freedom. I walked away from that wedding, feeling a profound sense of closure. My past, once a heavy anchor, now felt like a distant shore. I had found my voice, not in anger or revenge, but in the quiet, undeniable power of truth. They had replaced me with a golden child, but in doing so, they had inadvertently forged me into something stronger, something real. And in the end, the truth had set us both free, though only one of us had truly learned to fly. My journey was my own, built on my own merits, propelled by my own dreams, a universe away from the gilded cage I had left behind. The echoes of my past, once so loud and insistent, gradually faded into a distant hum as I fully embraced my new life. The academic world, with its boundless intellectual challenges and its community of curious minds, became my true home. My graduate studies in astrophysics at the prestigious California Institute of Technology were intensely demanding, pushing me to my limits, but it was a challenge I welcomed, a stark contrast to the quiet stagnation of my earlier years. Every problem solved, every concept grasped, every late night spent poring over equations under the glow of a desk lamp felt like a deliberate act of creation, of building something substantial and enduring. I was constructing a future on a foundation of my own making, brick by honest brick. My advisor, Dr. Eris Thorne, a brilliant and notoriously demanding astrophysicist, became a mentor in the truest sense of the word. He saw my analytical mind, my insatiable curiosity, and my quiet perseverance. He didn't care about my family background or my social graces. He cared about my capacity for thought, my dedication to scientific inquiry. His challenging questions and rigorous expectations sharpened my intellect, pushing me to delve deeper, to question more, to seek answers beyond the obvious. It was a refreshing change from the superficial appraisals I had endured for so long. Here, my worth was measured by my intellect and my contributions, not by how brightly I shone compared to someone else. I cultivated a small but deeply supportive circle of friends, fellow graduate students, equally obsessed with the mysteries of the universe, who understood the unique pressures and exhilarating triumphs of academic research. We bonded over shared frustrations with complex theories, over the heady excitement of new discoveries, and over endless cups of stale coffee in the late hours of the lab. These friendships were built on genuine respect and shared passions, free from the insidious currents of competition and comparison that had poisoned my childhood. They saw me Ava, for my intellect, my quirks, my quiet humor, not as an appendage to a more dazzling personality. My social media presence was minimal, a deliberate choice. I had learned early on the insidious power of curated images and fabricated narratives. My blog, which had inadvertently played such a pivotal role in my past, remained a private space, a sanctuary for my thoughts, but it no longer felt like a desperate plea for recognition. It was a place for self-reflection, a quiet dialogue with my own evolving self. I shared my scientific breakthroughs in peer-reviewed journals, my creative writing in literary magazines, allowing my work to speak for itself, unadorned by manufactured glamour. Over the years, the updates from my parents became even more infrequent, their voices growing distant, both literally and figuratively. They had retired, moved to a smaller home in a different state, and seemed to have retreated into a world of their own making. A world still orbiting Madison, albeit a less glamorous version of her. My mother would occasionally send me a brief text, usually about a new recipe she'd tried or a television show she was watching. My father, even less. Our conversations were functional, devoid of emotional depth, a polite exchange of superficial pleasantries. They never asked about my research, my publications, my life. And I, in turn, never offered unsolicited details, understanding that their capacity for genuine interest, where I was concerned, remained limited. Madison. I learned through the occasional, almost accidental family gathering, continued her erratic trajectory. She cycled through various short-lived careers. An aspiring influencer who struggled to gain traction, a real estate agent who never closed a deal, a boutique manager who quickly tired of the mundane tasks. Each new venture was announced with a flurry of initial excitement from my parents, followed by a quiet fading into disappointed silence. She never found her footing, never discovered a genuine passion, perhaps because she had never been forced to, never had to rely on her own innate abilities. The manufactured image of perfection she had presented for so long had left her ill-equipped to face the messy, unglamorous realities of genuine effort and perseverance. The truth, I realized, hadn't just denied her a college education, it had exposed the hollowness of her character. The irony was not lost on me. While I, the quiet, uninspired child, was building a life of intellectual rigor and genuine accomplishment, Madison, the golden child, was adrift, still searching for the external validation that had once so defined her. There was no malice in this observation, just a quiet, profound understanding of the divergent paths our lives had taken. My revenge, if it could even be called that, was not in her downfall, but in my own ascent, an ascent built on integrity and authentic effort. One year, for my 30th birthday, my parents unexpectedly called. It was a rare, concerted effort. My mother, her voice thin with age, began, "Ava, dear, we were just thinking, it's your big 3-0. Well, we want to fly out and see you. Madison's going to be in the area too for a seminar. We thought it would be a nice family reunion. The idea of a family reunion with Madison, particularly given her persistent struggles and their unacknowledged favoritism, filled me with a familiar unease. I politely declined, citing an upcoming research deadline and a conference. It wasn't entirely a lie, my schedule was indeed demanding. But it was also a firm boundary, a quiet refusal to step back into the dynamic that had overshadowed my youth. My life was now defined by forward momentum, by discovery, by the exhilarating pursuit of knowledge. I thrived in the vibrant intellectual atmosphere of the university, contributing to groundbreaking research on dark matter and cosmic microwave background radiation. I gave presentations at international conferences, published papers in prestigious journals, and earned the respect of my peers and mentors. My name, Ava, was now associated with my own accomplishments, not with a comparison to anyone else. It was a quiet triumph, deeply satisfying. Years later, I received a small, unassuming package in the mail. It was from my mother. Inside, nestled amongst tissue paper, was a faded, lopsided drawing of a purple flower with a green stem. My drawing, from when I was 4 years old. On the back, in my mother's shaky handwriting, were 3 words. I kept this. No apology, no explanation, no grand pronouncement. Just that. I kept this. A small, silent acknowledgement, perhaps of a love that had always been there, buried beneath layers of distraction and misplaced focus. It wasn't a full reconciliation, not a dramatic breakthrough, but it was a quiet olive branch, a tiny bridge offered across the chasm of the past. I traced the crude outlines of the purple petals, a faint smile touching my lips. It was a tangible link to a forgotten part of myself, a testament to the child who had yearned for recognition. And in that moment, I realized that the true victory wasn't just about Madison's downfall, but about my own liberation. It was about the freedom to be myself, to live my truth, to build a life defined by my own choices and my own hard-won achievements. The quiet satisfaction of my present, the boundless potential of my future, dwarfed the bitterness of my past. The truth, it turned out, hadn't just set me free from the shadow of the golden child. It had set me free to truly live, to truly shine, in a universe that was vast, infinite, and entirely my own. And Madison? Her story was simply a cautionary tale, a fading whisper in the background of my brilliant, expanding universe. She had chosen the path of deception, and the consequences, though perhaps unexpected, had been entirely her own. I, Ava, the once invisible girl, was now visible, radiant, and undeniably real. And no one ever asked how. They simply saw the results, the life I had meticulously crafted, the journey I had bravely undertaken, and the undeniable light that now shone from within me. The unexpected arrival of my childhood drawing, a simple, faded image of a purple flower, became a quiet turning point. It wasn't a grand gesture, not a dramatic apology, but its subtle presence chipped away at the last vestiges of bitterness that had clung to my past. It was a recognition, however belated and understated, that I had always been there, always seen, in some small corner of my mother's heart. This wasn't about erasing the past, or demanding a cinematic reconciliation. It was about finding a fragile peace with it, a quiet understanding that even in the most flawed relationships, glimmers of connection could exist. My life, however, remained firmly anchored in the present and oriented towards the future. My work in astrophysics became more consuming, more rewarding. I was now a postdoctoral researcher, contributing to a groundbreaking project mapping distant galaxies, deciphering the universe's most ancient secrets. The challenges were immense, the hours long, but the intellectual stimulation was unparalleled. It was a world where merit was everything, where ideas were debated with fierce intellect, and where personal history faded into insignificance compared to the pursuit of knowledge. Here, my quiet nature was seen as a strength, allowing for deep concentration and thoughtful analysis. My relationships with my colleagues were built on shared passion and mutual respect. I formed a particularly close bond with Dr. Kenji Tanaka, a brilliant and soft-spoken physicist from Japan. We spent countless hours in the lab, debating theories, analyzing data, and pushing the boundaries of our understanding. Our conversations often extended beyond the scientific, touching on philosophy, art, and the intricate dance of human connection. Kenji saw me, truly saw me, not just for my intellect, but for my quiet strength, my resilience, and the subtle humor that peeked through my serious demeanor. He had a calmness that mirrored my own, a depth of understanding that resonated deeply. He was observant, noticing the quiet moments of introspection that still occasionally clouded my eyes. One evening, after a particularly late session at the observatory, gazing at the distant, shimmering galaxies through the powerful telescope, Kenji turned to me. "Ava," he began, his voice thoughtful. "Sometimes, when you look at the stars, there's a flicker of melancholy, as if you're searching for something, or remembering something far away." I paused, considering his words. His perception was uncanny. "The past leaves its mark, Kenji," I admitted, my voice low. "Even when you try to leave it behind." I found myself, for the first time, sharing fragments of my childhood, the long shadow of Madison, the feeling of invisibility. I spoke of the golden child, of the constant comparison, of the quiet resentment that had simmered for so long. I didn't mention the plagiarism, the specific act that had shattered her world, but I spoke of the underlying dynamic, the suffocating weight of being perpetually overlooked. Kenji listened with an unwavering intensity, his dark eyes reflecting empathy. When I finished, he simply nodded. "It takes immense strength, Ava," he said, his voice gentle, "to find your own light when you've been told for so long that someone else's is brighter. To forge your own path, authentically." His validation was a balm, a quiet confirmation that my journey, with all its hidden struggles, was seen and understood. In that moment, looking at the distant, silent galaxies, I felt a deeper connection to Kenji than I had ever felt with anyone before. My graduate work culminated in a published paper that gained significant recognition in the astrophysics community, offering a novel interpretation of galaxy formation. It was a quiet triumph, a culmination of years of dedicated work, and it opened doors to further research opportunities. I was invited to speak at international conferences, my presentations delivered with a quiet confidence that belied my introverted nature. My name, Ava Delgado, became synonymous with rigorous research and innovative thought, standing entirely on its own merit. The phone calls from my parents continued, polite and sporadic. They still mentioned Madison, usually with a resigned sigh. She had tried her hand at various online businesses, none of them lasting, her life still defined by fleeting enthusiasms and unfulfilled promises. It was clear she hadn't found her own truth, hadn't learned to build anything solid from within. There was no joy in this knowledge, just a quiet, almost clinical understanding of how different our paths had become. The consequences of her dishonesty, and their enabling, had a long, slow burn. Then came the news of my mother's illness. It was sudden, severe. My father called, his voice uncharacteristically shaky, the composure that had defined him cracking under the weight of fear. "Ava," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Your mother. She's not well. The doctors, they say it's serious." Despite the distance, despite the years of emotional neglect, a primal instinct to be there, to offer support, stirred within me. She was still my mother, and the faded purple flower still rested on my desk. I booked a flight, leaving my research, my new life, to return to the place that had once been my prison. The old house felt smaller, dustier, infused with the scent of illness and unspoken anxieties. My mother was frail, her vibrant energy diminished. My father, usually so stoic, moved with a newfound vulnerability. And Madison was there too. She was outwardly solicitous, but her presence felt brittle, almost performative. She fussed over my mother, offered strained conversation. But there was an undercurrent of tension, a desperate need for recognition even in this somber setting. During my mother's illness, I found myself quietly taking on many of the practical burdens. I organized medication schedules, managed household affairs, and navigated the complex medical jargon with the calm precision of a scientist. I didn't seek praise, merely acted out of necessity and a quiet sense of duty. My father, overwhelmed, began to lean on me, subtly at first, then more openly. He'd ask for my advice, trust my decisions, and look at me with an expression that was new, almost akin to respect, a quiet acknowledgement of my competence. One afternoon, as my mother drifted in and out of sleep, my father sat with me in the quiet living room. "Ava," he said, his voice low, "you've been incredible. I don't know what we would have done without you. You've handled everything." He paused, looking at me, his gaze clear, perhaps for the first time in years. I think we made some mistakes, didn't we? With you? With Madison? We were so caught up in appearances, in what we thought success looked like." The words hung in the air, a belated, unspoken apology. It wasn't explicit, but it was there, in the tremor of his voice, in the vulnerability of his eyes. It was an acknowledgement, finally, of the imbalanced dynamic, the years of overlooked effort. A part of me, the child who had yearned for this recognition, felt a quiet ache, a bittersweet release. "We all make mistakes, Dad," I said gently, my voice calm, devoid of resentment. "What matters is what we learn from them." It was the truth, my truth, forged in the crucible of my own journey. He nodded, a profound sigh escaping him. "Madison, she's still struggling. She blames everyone but herself. Says she never got a fair chance." He looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. He still didn't know, not definitively. But perhaps, he suspected. I met his gaze, and for the first time, allowed a hint of the truth to glimmer in my eyes, a silent, unspoken acknowledgement of my role, of the justice that had been served. He didn't press. He simply nodded again, a new understanding dawning in his eyes, a silent reckoning. The moment passed, unspoken yet profoundly significant. My mother rallied, slowly, surprisingly, her illness receding. The crisis, though terrifying, had served as a strange catalyst, shifting the family dynamic in subtle but undeniable ways. My father's appreciation for me was palpable, a quiet, consistent warmth that was entirely new. He saw me now, truly saw me, not as a reflection of Madison, but as my own capable, compassionate self. As I prepared to return to my life, to my research, to Kenji, my mother called me into her room. She looked tired, but her eyes held a clarity I hadn't seen in years. "Ava," she said, her voice thin but steady, "that drawing. The purple flower. I kept it because it was always so you so determined. So unique. Even then." She paused, then a single tear traced a path down her cheek. "I'm so sorry, sweetie. I should have seen you more clearly. Always." The explicit apology I had never expected, never dared to hope for, finally came. It was raw, honest, and filled with a profound regret. In that moment, the last vestiges of the bitterness that had lingered in my heart dissolved. It wasn't about what I had done to Madison, it was about what I had found for myself. And my parents, finally, saw it too. I hugged her, a genuine, heartfelt embrace. "It's okay, Mom," I whispered, her frail body warm in my arms. It's okay. I returned to my life, to my research, to Kenji, feeling lighter, freer than ever before. The past was not erased, but its sharp edges had softened, its burdens lifted. I was Ava, a scientist, a woman in love, a daughter who had finally found a fragile peace with her past. The golden child story had ended in self-inflicted failure, but mine had just truly begun, built on honesty, resilience, and the unwavering pursuit of my own truth, under the vast, boundless canvas of the Balm Bird universe. And as for the truth I had sent to those colleges, it had done its work, silently and irrevocably, allowing me to finally step into my own brilliant light.